The wind screamed across the frozen mountains like a wild animal. Snow fell thick and heavy, covering everything in a silent white blanket. My little hut, made of stone and scrap metal, shivered under the storm. Inside, I stirred a pot of thick stew, feeling the chill bite through the walls. The fire crackled, but it was not enough to push the cold away completely. I had been alone for days, surviving on what little food I had, wrapped in worn blankets and hope. Suddenly, a soft, almost desperate knock came at the door. My heart jumped. Who could be out in a storm like this? The snow was ruthless, each gust more powerful than the last. I wiped my hands on my coat and approached carefully. Peering through the frost-covered window, I saw her. She was unlike anything I had seen before. Her skin glowed faintly, a soft blue light that shimmered through the heavy snow. Her eyes were large, almost too big for her face, reflecting the white of the blizzard and a fear I could feel in my chest. She was shaking violently, her thin cloak offering no protection against the storm. She tried to step closer to the hut, but the wind pushed her back, making her stumble in the snow. I opened the door before she could move away. "It's safe here," I called, my voice firm but kind. The words were swallowed a little by the howling wind, but she heard them. Her wide eyes froze on mine. She hesitated, as if unsure whether to trust a human. Then, finally, she stepped inside, collapsing near the doorway. Snow fell from her hair and shoulders, melting on the cold floor. I grabbed a blanket and wrapped it around her shivering shoulders. "You're safe now," I said gently. She pulled the blanket close, pressing it to her chest. Her hands were delicate, almost fragile, but trembling with exhaustion. She looked up at me, eyes wide, as if searching for some hidden danger in my face. I smiled softly, hoping to show that I meant no harm. The storm outside raged like an angry ocean, but inside, the hut felt warmer, safer. I handed her a bowl of thick stew, still steaming from the pot. She took it with both hands, her fingers brushing mine for a brief moment. That simple touch was electric, a connection that didn't need words. She stared at the stew like it was magic, and I couldn't help but smile again. She finally spoke, her voice small and melodic, trembling from cold and fear. I did not think I would survive this storm." The words sounded strange, but somehow I understood. They carried the weight of someone who had traveled far, someone who had seen danger and believed it could end her life. I shook my head. "You made it here. That's what matters." Her eyes softened, but she still kept glancing at the door and windows, as if expecting the blizzard to snatch her away at any moment. I knew then that it was not just the cold that frightened her, it was the unknown. The fear of trust, the fear of depending on someone she barely knew, the fear of letting go of control. I stoked the fire again, letting the warmth spread through the hut. I didn't speak for a while. Sometimes words are useless when the storm outside roars so loud. Instead, I just moved quietly, keeping the fire alive, keeping the food warm, and letting her adjust to the safety she had been too afraid to accept. The night stretched on, long and endless. She huddled near the fire, her glowing skin casting soft blue light across the wooden floor. I watched her, curious and careful. There was a fragility to her, but also a strange strength, something beyond the fear and the trembling. I could feel it, a spark that had survived the storm to reach me. Hours passed. The wind outside never ceased, but inside, a small bond began to form. No words, just presence. Her eyes, wide and wary at first, began to relax. She dared to lift her gaze, meeting mine. For the first time, in the middle of a frozen, roaring storm, two beings from completely different worlds acknowledged each other's existence. The blizzard raged. But inside my little hut, a quiet warmth grew. Something fragile, something human, was taking root. And in that moment, I realized the storm outside could never match the storm of fear she had survived, and that perhaps, together, we could face whatever came next. The storm outside had not slowed. Snowflakes slapped against the hut, and the wind whistled through cracks in the walls, but inside, the world felt different, quiet, fragile. She sat in the corner wrapped tightly in the blanket, her glowing skin soft against the dim light of the fire. Every few moments, she glanced at the window, her eyes wide and anxious, as if expecting the blizzard to burst inside at any second. I kept busy, moving between the fire and the small table, stirring the stew and stacking wood. I didn't speak much. Words weren't necessary yet. Sometimes silence says more than conversation, and right now, the silence was heavy with unspoken tension. Finally, she broke it. "I have never been in snow like this," she said softly. Her voice trembled with awe and fear mixed together. "In my world, the ground is always warm. The skies are never white with this. Cold." She hugged her knees, her shoulders shivering. The warmth of the blanket and fire was still not enough to chase the fear from her body. I nodded, crouching a little so I could be at her level. "It's harsh, yes," I said, my voice steady. "But it's beautiful too. Look outside, see the way the snow moves like it's alive? That's something you won't find anywhere else." I gestured toward the window, where snow swirled in endless white patterns. She hesitated, then lifted her gaze to the storm outside. Her eyes softened slightly, filled with wonder. "It is strange. I never imagined snow could be like this, so alive, like you say." For the first time, a small smile appeared on her face. A hesitant thing, but real. I saw a flicker of trust in her eyes, a tiny thread connecting us despite our differences. I realized then that survival wasn't just about warmth or food, it was about connection. And right now, she needed that more than anything. I handed her another bowl of stew. "Eat, you need energy," I said. She took it slowly, her fingers brushing mine again. Each touch was careful, almost shy, but it carried a quiet understanding. She didn't speak, but I felt her gratitude in the way she held the bowl close to her chest. The night grew longer. Outside, the storm raged, but inside, we shared small moments, her drinking slowly, me stoking the fire, both of us listening to the wind howl. I learned her breathing patterns, the way her hands shook slightly after the cold, the way her eyes darted at every noise outside. She was terrified, yes, but she was also alive and she had come this far. "Why? Do you help me?" she asked suddenly, her voice barely a whisper. Her eyes, wide and searching, met mine. There was something in that question, a mixture of fear and disbelief. She had fled the storm, fled my hut, thinking she could survive on her own. And yet here she was, unsure if she could even trust me. I smiled gently. "Because no one should face this alone," I said simply. "Humans, we survive together. We care for each other, even for strangers. That's what makes us strong." She blinked slowly, absorbing my words. I could see the wheels turning in her mind, the fear battling with curiosity and wonder. Slowly she relaxed a little, leaning back against the wall. Her eyes no longer darted constantly to the door. She stayed in this small hut with a stranger she barely knew. The wind outside roared, shaking the walls. But inside, a fragile warmth began to grow, not just from the fire, but from something stronger: trust, connection, a realization that perhaps this stranger, could keep her safe. And for the first time, in the middle of a storm that could have killed her, she allowed herself to believe that survival wasn't about running alone. It was about finding someone worth trusting, and maybe, just maybe, she had found that in me. The storm had not yet passed, but inside the hut, the fire's warmth began to chase away some of the fear. She sat near it, her glowing skin reflecting the soft orange light. The bowl of stew in her hands had long since cooled, but she didn't mind. She was watching me, her eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "I have never met anyone like you," she said softly, almost to herself. Her voice carried a strange melody, and I could feel the weight behind her words. She had traveled far, survived dangers I couldn't imagine. And yet here she was, staring at me as if trying to understand what kind of human could survive this storm and offer safety to a stranger. I shrugged lightly, unsure how to answer. Unjust. Human, I said. But my voice was quiet, because I knew words alone couldn't explain what humans were capable of. Strength wasn't always about fighting. Sometimes it was about patience. Sometimes it was about hope. Sometimes it was simply about being there when someone needed help the most. She tilted her head, studying me carefully. You are different from what I expected. In my world, strangers do not help. They avoid each other. They survive alone. You reached out. There was a softness in her words now, almost like wonder. I realized she was learning something about humans that she hadn't believed before. Something bigger than snowstorms, bigger than survival. Something that made us strong. I gestured to the fire. You can stay here until the storm ends. Rest, warm up, eat. That's all you need to do. She nodded slowly, wrapping her arms around her knees. Her body was tense, but the tension was easing bit by bit. Each moment in the warmth, each breath of fire-heated air, chipped away at the fear she carried. The silence returned, but it was different now. It wasn't heavy or tense. It was calm, like the quiet after a river storm. We didn't speak, but we were together. That togetherness was something new, something foreign, yet calm. Forting. I realized that connection was more important than words. It was stronger than fear. After a while, she spoke again, her voice trembling slightly, but with a hint of curiosity. Your world. It is harsh, yet you endure. You survive in it. I looked at her, seeing both admiration and disbelief in her eyes. We do, I said simply. Because we must. And because we care for each other. Her gaze softened. She was no longer just a frightened traveler seeking shelter. She was watching me closely, noticing the small things, how I moved around the hut, how I kept the fire going, how I had prepared food for her without a second thought. To her, these acts were proof. Proof that humans had a different kind of strength. Not the kind that broke things or conquered worlds, but the kind that inspired hope. The kind that could save lives in ways she had never imagined. She reached out for the blanket again, pulling it tightly around herself. I could see her shoulders relaxing, just a little, and her wide eyes flicking toward me with something like trust. It was fragile, yes, but real. She was beginning to believe that she could survive, not just the storm, but whatever lay beyond it, with someone who would not abandon her. The wind outside howled like a beast. But inside the little hut, there was warmth. Warmth from the fire, warmth from shared silence, warmth from the first small thread of connection between two very different worlds. She finally whispered, almost to herself, "Humans are stronger than I imagined." I smiled gently. "We try," I said. And in that simple sentence, I felt something shift. The storm could rage outside, but inside, a bridge was forming. A bridge between species, between worlds, between fear and trust. And I knew, without saying a word, that this small connection would carry us both through whatever the blizzard or life threw at us next. The storm outside was relentless. The wind screamed like a wild animal, shaking the hut and rattling the thin windows. Snow piled high against the walls, and the cold tried to creep through every crack. But inside, the fire glowed, steady and warm, fighting against the chill. She sat close, her glowing blue skin flickering in the orange light. Her eyes, still wary, followed every movement I made, as if expecting danger at every step. I stood and moved to check the roof. The snow had grown heavy, and I needed to make sure the hut could withstand it. She watched silently, fear mixing with curiosity. "You risk yourself?" she asked, her voice soft, trembling. Her wide eyes reflected both awe and disbelief. You risk leaving the warmth just to keep me safe? I paused, looking back at her. It's nothing, I said, shrugging. No one should face the storm alone. If you're alive, then it's worth it. Her mouth opened slightly, like she wanted to say more, but no words came. Instead, she just watched me, the fear slowly shifting into something else: respect, wonder, maybe even trust. I realized she had never seen a human put themselves in danger just to help someone else. The thought seemed impossible to her, but that impossibility was exactly what defined us. Humans didn't just survive, they cared. And sometimes that made us stronger than any storm. I climbed carefully onto the roof to knock off the thick snow. Each step was treacherous, and the cold cut through my clothes like knives. She shivered below, gripping the blanket around her, her eyes following every movement. She wanted to look away, to pretend she wasn't afraid. But she couldn't. She was learning something about humans she hadn't believed possible. When I finally returned inside, my hair covered in snow and my clothes wet, she stayed quiet for a moment. Then she spoke, almost a whisper. You endure this for me? Yes, I said, sitting near her, letting the fire warm my frozen hands. Because you matter. Because no one should face the storm alone. She looked at me for a long moment. Her glowing face was soft now, her fear still present, but tempered by something new. Humans, you are. Different, stronger. In ways I do not understand. I smiled gently. Strength isn't always about fighting. Sometimes it's about standing there when it matters. Sometimes it's about warmth, hope, and trust. That's how humans survive. She looked down at her hands, then slowly back up at me. Her eyes were softer now, less guarded, and I could feel the first real bond forming. She didn't have to speak. Her trust was showing in the way she stayed near the fire, in the way she let me tend to the hut, in the way she finally allowed herself to rest. The storm outside continued to roar. But inside, a quiet warmth had taken hold. It wasn't just the fire, it was something deeper. A connection formed through shared survival, through care, through the silent understanding that we were not alone. After a while, she whispered again, this time with a hint of a smile. I did not expect humans to be like this. To endure for others. To protect. I nodded. We endure. We protect. And sometimes that's the most powerful thing we can do. She looked at me, her glowing eyes wide and thoughtful. For the first time, I saw admiration, respect, and hope intertwined in her gaze. The storm outside was terrifying, but the storm inside her heart, the fear of trust, was beginning to calm. And I knew, in that small hut, with the snow piling high around us, that humanity's true strength had shown itself not in muscle or weapon, but in courage, care, and unshakable heart. By morning, the blizzard had begun to ease, though the snow still fell gently like a soft cold curtain outside. The wind had quieted, leaving only the distant echo of gusts through the mountains. Inside the hut, the fire glowed steadily, casting warm light over her glowing blue skin. She sat closer now, not at the far corner anymore, but near the hearth, letting the heat chase away the last shivers of the night. She looked at me, her eyes searching. I almost did not come in, she admitted softly, her voice trembling with the memory of fear. I thought I could survive outside. I thought I had to. But I saw your light, and I don't know. I felt safe. I gave a small smile, leaning against the wall near her. Sometimes, trusting someone is harder than surviving the storm, I said gently. But it's worth it. It's how we get through life, how we survive more than just the cold. Her eyes softened, and she let out a small laugh, delicate and musical. You humans, you are strange. You endure the worst, and yet you care. Protect, even strangers. She paused, her gaze falling to the fire. I did not believe it before. I thought survival was only for the strongest, the fastest. I never imagined. Her voice trailed off, as if searching for words she didn't know how to say. You're learning, I said quietly. Survival isn't just about strength. It's about courage, about heart, about helping others when you can, even when it's hard. That's the human way. She looked up at me again, her wide eyes full of wonder. And you risked yourself for me. You went out into the storm, your own body freezing, just to make sure this hut stayed safe. She shook her head slowly, still processing. I do not understand it. I have never seen anything like it. I shrugged, trying to keep my words simple. Because it's not about understanding. It's about choosing to care. Choosing to be human. She was silent for a while, watching the fire flicker. Then softly she said, Humans, you are stronger than I imagined. Not only in body but in heart, in spirit. You endure, you protect, and you inspire hope. I did not think it was possible. I felt warmth, deeper than the fire, rise in my chest. It wasn't pride for myself, but pride in what humans could do. We could survive. We could care. We could inspire hope in someone from a completely different world. Someone who had seen countless dangers and still carried fear. The hut was quiet for a while. The snow falling gently outside, the storm reduced to a whisper. She moved closer to the fire, letting the warmth seep into her body. I handed her a fresh bowl of stew, and she accepted it, her fingers brushing mine again in a quiet, hesitant trust. You saved me, she said finally, her voice trembling. Not just from the storm, but from myself, from my fear. You made me feel safe, cared for. She paused, taking a deep breath. I never expected it. I smiled gently. You don't have to understand it. You just have to accept it. That's enough. Her eyes softened, glimmering with something new hope. And for the first time, I saw her not as a stranger or a frightened alien, but as someone beginning to trust. Trust that humans, despite everything, could be a light in the darkest storms. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the mountains in white. Inside, warmth, hope, and a fragile bond between two beings from different worlds filled the little hut. And in that small room, I knew something important had begun, a connection that would survive storms. Fear and uncertainty, built on the simple, unshakable power of human heart. The blizzard had finally passed. The wind no longer screamed, and the snow had softened into a quiet, endless white blanket covering the mountains. Light filtered weakly through the clouds, painting the hut in a pale silver glow. Inside, the warmth of the fire made the room feel safe, almost like a small world of its own. She sat near it, her glowing blue skin shimmering softly. Her eyes, which had once been full of fear, now carried curiosity and something more trust. She watched me as I worked on repairing this small wooden door that had loosened in the storm. You do everything yourself, she said, her voice low, almost surprised. You fix, you cook, you survive. And yet you still protect me. I paused, leaning on the doorframe and smiling gently. That's what it means to be human, I said. We endure, we survive, but we also care. We don't leave others to face the storm alone. Her eyes softened, reflecting a mixture of admiration and awe. In my world, survival is cold. You survive or you die. There is no trust, no warmth. But you are different. Stronger, not just in body, but in heart. I shrugged lightly, unsure how to respond. Words felt small compared to the trust I saw growing in her eyes. So instead, I went back to work, repairing the door and stacking more wood by the fire. She watched quietly, occasionally glancing at the window and then back at me. Every glance carried unspoken questions, and every time, I tried to answer them without words. Finally, she spoke again, softly. I was going to leave, before. When the storm hit, I thought I could survive alone. But I did not. I was afraid. Afraid of the storm, yes, but afraid of trusting someone. She paused, drawing the blanket tighter around her shoulders. And now, I see that I can trust you. Her words struck me. Trust. Something she had never given lightly, and now she offered it to me after only one night. It was fragile, yes, but real. And in that fragile trust, I felt a deep, unspoken bond forming. A bridge between two worlds, built on care, courage, and the human way of surviving together. I smiled, moving closer to the fire and letting the warmth reach her. Trust is hard, I said softly, but it makes us stronger. Stronger than fear. Stronger than storms. She nodded slowly, her glowing eyes reflecting the firelight. For the first time, she seemed relaxed, letting herself feel warmth and safety without questioning it. Her shoulders uncurled, her breathing became steady, and she even allowed herself a small smile. We sat together in silence for a while, listening to the soft sounds of melting snow outside. The storm was gone, but its memory lingered. And yet, inside this little hut, the storm of fear had been replaced by something new. Hope, understanding, and a connection that neither of us had expected. Humans. She whispered, almost to herself, "You endure. Not just the storm, but each other. You care, you protect, and you inspire." I did not believe it until now. I nodded quietly. "We always do," I said. "It's who we are." Her eyes met mine, full of unspoken emotion. She had come here afraid, lost, and alone. Now she stayed, trusting not just my strength, but my heart. And in that moment, I realized something profound. Survival wasn't only about enduring storms or facing danger. It was about connection, courage, and the human way of standing together. No matter how cold or harsh the world might be. And for the first time, I saw her not just as a stranger or a lost traveler, but as someone beginning to understand humans and the quiet, unshakable power of hope, care, and trust that defines us. The storm had passed entirely. The mountains were quiet now, their peaks covered in soft white snow, sparkling faintly in the pale sunlight. The wind had calmed, leaving the world still and serene. Inside the hut, the fire's warmth spread evenly, chasing away the last chill of the night. She stood near the doorway, her glowing blue skin reflecting the soft light. Her eyes, wide and thoughtful, scanned the snow-covered landscape, and then fell on me. I never imagined your world could be so beautiful," she said softly, her voice full of wonder. She took a cautious step forward, letting herself feel warmth not just from the fire, but from something deeper, something human. I smiled gently, stepping closer. "It's beautiful, yes, but the beauty isn't just outside. It's in people, how we endure, how we care, how we survive together." She looked at me, her glowing eyes searching, as if trying to understand the simple truth behind my words. I thought survival was only about strength, about fighting, about being alone. She shook her head slowly, almost in disbelief. "But you survive differently. You endure. With heart. With courage. With kindness. I do not know how to explain it." "You don't need to explain," I said quietly. "You just need to see it. And maybe, one day, you'll understand it yourself." She moved closer to the fire, letting the warmth seep into her body. I handed her a cup of hot tea, still steaming, and she took it carefully, her fingers brushing mine. That touch, small as it was, carried a weight heavier than snowstorms. Trust had been forged here, in this tiny hut, in the middle of a blizzard that had threatened to take everything. For a long moment, we simply looked at each other. No words were needed. The fear that had brought her here was gone, replaced not just by warmth, but by understanding, respect, and hope. She had come as a stranger, frightened and unsure. Now she stayed, believing not just in her survival, but in the quiet, unshakable power of humans. I do not think I would have made it without you, she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. Not just the storm, but myself, my fear, my doubts. You saved me. I shook my head softly. No one survives alone. You were brave too. You endured the storm, even when it seemed impossible. You just needed someone to stand with you. Her eyes glistened as she smiled faintly. For the first time, I saw her completely at ease, letting go of fear, letting trust bloom. And in that moment, I realized something simple, yet profound. Survival wasn't just about strength or skill. It was about connection, about hope, about being human. Outside, the snow sparkled under the clearing sky. The world was silent, clean, and beautiful. Inside the hut, two beings from different worlds stood together, bound not by shared history, but by shared understanding. She had come to escape a storm, but she had found something greater, the human way. Thank you, she whispered softly, her voice full of meaning. For showing me hope, for showing me humans. I smiled, looking out at the snow-covered mountains. We always endure. We always care. That's who we are. That's what makes us human. She nodded, letting the words sink in, her eyes reflecting something she had never felt before: trust, admiration, and the quiet wonder of discovering a world she hadn't believed existed. And I knew, as I looked at her, that she would carry this lesson wherever she went. That humans, though fragile and ordinary in many ways, could inspire courage, hope, and trust, even in the darkest storms. And in that small hut, surrounded by snow and silence, humanity had quietly shown its might, not in battle, not in weapons, not in conquest, but in heart, endurance, and unwavering care. The blizzard had ended, but the story and the bond we had forged would last far longer than the cold ever could. The storm had passed entirely. The mountains were quiet now, their peaks covered in soft white snow, sparkling faintly in the pale sunlight. The wind had calmed, leaving the world still and serene. Inside the hut, the fire's warmth spread evenly, chasing away the last chill of the night. She stood near the doorway, her glowing blue skin reflecting the soft light. Her eyes, wide and thoughtful, scanned the snow-covered landscape, and then fell on me. I never imagined your world could be so beautiful, she said softly, her voice full of wonder. She took a cautious step forward, letting herself feel warmth, not just from the fire, but from something deeper, something human. I smiled gently, stepping closer. It's beautiful, yes, but the beauty isn't just outside. It's in people, how we endure, how we care, how we survive together. She looked at me, her glowing eyes searching, as if trying to understand the simple truth behind my words. I thought survival was only about strength, about fighting, about being alone. She shook her head slowly, almost in disbelief. But you survive differently. You endure, with heart, with courage, with kindness. I do not know how to explain it. You don't need to explain, I said quietly. You just need to see it. And maybe, one day, you'll understand it yourself. She moved closer to the fire, letting the warmth seep into her body. I handed her a cup of hot tea, still steaming, and she took it carefully, her fingers brushing mine. That touch, small as it was, carried a weight heavier than snowstorms. Trust had been forged here, in this tiny hut, in the middle of a blizzard that had threatened to take everything. For a long moment, we simply looked at each other. No words were needed. The fear that had brought her here was gone, replaced not just by warmth, but by understanding, respect, and hope. She had come as a stranger, frightened and unsure. Now she stayed, believing not just in her survival, but in the quiet, unshakable power of humans. I do not think I would have made it without you, she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. Not just the storm, but myself, my fear, my doubts. You saved me. I shook my head softly. No one survives alone. You were brave too. You endured the storm, even when it seemed impossible. You just needed someone to stand with you. Her eyes glistened as she smiled faintly. For the first time, I saw her completely at ease, letting go of fear, letting trust bloom. And in that moment, I realized something simple, yet profound. Survival wasn't just about strength or skill. It was about connection, about hope, about being human. Outside, the snow sparkled under the clearing sky. The world was silent, clean, and beautiful. Inside the hut, two beings from different worlds stood together, bound not by shared history, but by shared understanding. She had come to escape a storm, but she had found something greater, the human way. Thank you, she whispered softly, her voice full of meaning. For showing me hope, for showing me humans. I smiled, looking out at the snow-covered mountains. We always endure. We always care. That's who we are. That's what makes us human. She nodded, letting the words sink in, her eyes reflecting something she had never felt before: trust, admira,